So while there were a lot of cancellations, and I'd like to get Mr. Cronin on this, while there were a lot of cancellations, there were a lot of people who might have booked and said, you know what, we'll eventually wait it out and see what happens. What are you seeing from your standpoint in terms of people who have booked, then they postponed and now decided to come back into the country? Are we seeing a rise in that? Are people taking it up? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, when the pandemic first started, the biggest challenge for any hotel owner or manager was how to minimize the refunds. So you were forced to devise a way, and there was no one perfect way. But as was mentioned earlier, the potential drain on foreign exchange was huge, and there was no hotel that had adequate reserves to start refunding that in cash. So we had to be, all of us in the hotel industry and the tour industry, because don't forget, people also prepay their tours in many cases. We had to be very creative. In some cases, it came down to special offers. So you say to the person who wants to cancel, who has sent you an email that says, I want my money back, you have to give them a lot of things that are non-cash. So everyone was faced with that challenge. Once you got over that hurdle, depending on how well you got over it, the next challenge became, okay, you were successful in not refunding those people and getting them to make a reservation for the future when they thought the pandemic would be over. So you had people rescheduling their stays for 2 months in the future, 3 months in the future. Well, 3 months goes by and the pandemic is getting worse. So they write you again and said, well, I want my money back. Well, you go through the same song and dance trying to keep the money in your pocket instead of theirs. So they reschedule again for 3 months in the future. And on. So the industry has people who have rescheduled their stays 4 and 5 times. Yeah. You have people who have postponed weddings and honeymoons and all these kind of special, postponed them 3 and 4 times. I think where we're seeing it the most now, because of this, the real COVID crisis now focuses on Europe. I think most of the European potential guests who have made reservations, they're pretty much at the end of their rope now. They've postponed for over a year, maybe rescheduled 3 or 4 times. The situation there is pretty dire. I don't think we're going to get the European visitors back very soon. So it's caused a lot of cash flow difficulties, but we still try and woo them for the time when they're able to come back. But it has been, the industry has been devastated. That's no secret. But what I'd like to emphasize, John, is that where tourism fits into the overall Belizean economy. Yeah. We look on the news, we hear Ministry of Agriculture, who I have great respect for. They talk about, well, let's eat local cheese and let's stop importing craft cheese, for example. You hear people talking about, well, let's export soursop and custard apple. These are all great ideas. We've been talking about these things for the last 50 years. Right? Let me make one thing clear, that the path to the country's economic recovery runs squarely through tourism. Okay, there's no getting around it. All the cheese and all the custard apples in the world are not going to replace the hard cash earned by tourism. Yeah. So from a policy perspective, sure, let's talk about all this so-called diversification you're talking about. If we really want to see the entire economy saved from ruin, you've got to be looking specifically at tourism and what measures we can take to get the tourism industry back on its feet as soon as possible. And that includes a very strong marketing campaign. That includes certain incentives to the stakeholders in the industry, whether they're hotels, tour operators, restaurants, tour guides, drivers. It's a big industry. The cruise industry as well. We've got to get serious about helping this industry. Among the policymakers, I think some of them have this idea, and it's shared by the public, that somehow tourism isn't a real industry. It's kind of fun, and everyone in the tourism industry breaks at 5 o'clock for cocktails, and we go home and count all the money in our bank account. Okay, Tourism is an industry no different than the sugar industry, shrimp, bananas, retail, beverages, everything. It's an industry. This is the way the economy is going to recover, and the policymakers have to understand that.